This is a story about a space race, not the one to be first to put a man on the moon nearly 50 years ago.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Not even the one Elon Musk is running now to put humans on Mars in the next few years.
Just over 2 years, we'll be sending our first uncrewed starships to Mars. Then we'll send humans 2 years after that.
This is a space race much closer to Earth, one just a few hundred miles over our heads. It's being run in the world of low Earth orbit, or LEO. And what's at stake is potentially connecting everyone on the planet, including hard-to-reach bits.
And liftoff. Goes SpaceX, goes Starlink.
The stack of 60 Starlink satellites have successfully deployed from second stage.
This is just providing connectivity again in places where you don't get it through other means.
It's a much better solution than trying to bring fiber to really, really remote locations.
It's exciting. You never know what the next big thing is.
The battle for LEO satellite supremacy is on, for private companies and governments. Goldman Sachs values the market at $15 billion, but expects it to grow to $108 billion by 2035. And though it may be a competition, right now it looks like a race between several tortoises and one hare way out in front. That hare is named Starlink, and it's owned by Elon Musk's SpaceX.
It's 7,600 satellites today. They're expecting to get to as many as 48,000 satellites.
Craig Moffett is the co-founder and senior analyst at MoffettNathanson. He says Musk is so far ahead, it might be difficult for anyone to close the gap.
Starlink is probably the biggest part of SpaceX at the moment, and a part that investors seem to value the most highly. But it is integrally tied to the rest of the SpaceX business, which is the rockets and launches and all that sort of thing. The Starlink business itself, providing internet access primarily to rural areas, and again, obviously not just the United States, but globally, is enormously benefited by the fact that it's connected to a satellite launch business. Making one of these satellites costs $250,000 to $500,000. Launching them adds another $250,000 to $500,000 of cost to each individual satellite.
If the goal is connecting the world, why are LEO satellites the best way to get there? We traveled to MIT's Aeronautics and Astronautics Department to find out from Professor Carrie Cahoy, whose specialty is satellite engineering and communications.
Most people refer to low Earth orbit as orbits that are closer to Earth. You need to be above about 300 kilometers to stay in orbit without dropping out due to atmospheric drag right away. So it can go higher. It goes up to about 1,000 kilometers to 1,200 kilometers. When you're in low Earth orbit, if you're looking at a satellite go across the sky, it takes about 10 minutes to go from horizon to horizon. And then if you go high enough up, it's geostationary orbit, where the speed of the satellite going around the Earth is actually the same as the rotation of the Earth. And so they're always overhead in the same spot, which has a lot of advantages for communications, because you never have to worry about where they are. They're always right where you left them, above you. They're much farther away than low Earth orbit. One of the things that is a benefit for low Earth orbit is it's so much closer to the Earth. It only takes like 100 milliseconds or less to get a signal from the satellite down to the Earth, or a round trip time. When you're talking about going up to geostationary orbit, that's often large fractions of a second.
It's not just the size and proximity to Earth that makes LEO special. It's also the cost. A single GEO satellite can be up to 1,000 times more expensive than a LEO satellite to manufacture. On the other hand, it costs a lot more over time to keep those LEO satellites up there and working.
In low Earth orbit, unless you have a lot of propulsion on board and ways to keep yourself fighting atmospheric drag. So low Earth orbit is above the atmosphere, but there's just enough that it starts to slow you down and decrease your orbit energy and pull you in until you re-enter and burn up, unless they're higher and have bigger fuel tanks on board and more propellant to keep them up for longer. You know, the heavier you make them, the more it costs to launch them.
And liftoff.
You have to be launching as many as 25% of your satellites every year just to maintain the replacement cost of the constellation. So you're talking about launching 12,000 satellites a year. just to keep the existing constellation operating. Those kinds of costs are staggering.
Starlink has what looks like an overwhelming lead in LEO satellites. But it's not the only horse in the race. Jeff Bezos' Project Kuiper is trying at least to get on the track, though it's had to deal with manufacturing issues and launch delays earlier this year, currently leaving its constellation with fewer than 80 satellites in orbit, compared with Musk's 7,600 plus.
When you see someone like Amazon's Project Kuiper planning a second U.S.-centered started constellation that will occupy very much the same competitive niche as Starlink, it's really hard to see why that makes any sense and why there are any returns available to Amazon.
A Starlink competitor that's much further along than Kuiper comes from Europe. OneWeb launched its first operational LEO satellite the same year as Starlink. European satellite operator Eutelsat acquired OneWeb in 2023 and currently operates its own constellation of about 640 satellites. And OneWeb is pursuing a strategy that goes beyond LEO satellites alone.
We are the only satellite that has both the GEO and the LEO, and in fact quite a number of them, because we have 35 in GEO and over 600 in LEO.
Jean-Hubert Lenat is the Chief Strategy and Resources Officer at Eutelsat. And it's not just the combination of GEO and LEO satellites that he thinks sets his company on a different path from Starlink. It's also the market they serve.
Starlink does address the consumer market, meaning that they do need much more capacity to actually serve all those customers. We are providing very basic but important connectivity to businesses, to government. What is very important to understand is we are not in the consumer market. We have right now just north of 5 billion in total globally of connectivity in B2B. And this is going to grow at least 3 times between now and basically 2033, where it should be close to 15 billion by that time. But more importantly, the LEO connectivity is really what is going to drive this market. So the LEO connectivity right now in B2B is only around 2 billion as we speak this year, expected to be there. Whereas we do expect it will be north of 10 billion, probably 11 or 12 billion by the same year of 2033, meaning that it will just be multiplied 5-fold for that period.
OneWeb, a subsidiary of Eutelsat, manages its constellation out of its London office.
I lead a team that has one main objective, which is uptime. So guaranteeing that our customers are actually always able to connect to the service that we provide wherever they are. And the role of the team here is actually to guarantee that the system works at the top performance and it delivers the high speed and the low latency that the constellation is supposed to provide.
OneWeb also differs from Starlink in the way it gets its satellites into orbit. OneWeb has no rockets of its own, so it relies instead on other firms for its launches, including, you guessed it, Musk's SpaceX.
OneWeb, Sat Delta 2 and Delta 6, separation confirmed.
In fact, it is SpaceX's advances in reusable rockets that have transformed the industry.
Launch costs used to be very high, and it used to be very difficult to get things into orbit. So the reduction in cost of launch, partly driven by the reusable launch vehicles that SpaceX has developed with, for example, Falcon 9.
Both SpaceX and OneWeb have close relations with governments. SpaceX through U.S. government contracts, and OneWeb through partial government ownership. In mid-June, the UK government announced plans to invest 163 million euros in Eutelsat, joining France and other investors in a major funding round, bringing the total raise to 1.5 billion euros or $1.8 billion.
What are your capital needs going forward as you see it?
We have indeed our plans to invest 4 billion euros of capex between now and 2029. And those 4 billion, this is essentially a large part to replace our current LEO constellation. LEO satellites have a smaller lifetime of around 7 years, so we'll have to replace those ones by 2028. So a bulk of that capex is precisely for that replacement.
The LEO satellite race is on, and Starlink is way out in front. But how big is the prize for winning the race? How good a business is this? even for the leader, Starlink, it looks like it might not be as profitable as Musk originally thought.
Roughly half of the cost is in the rocketry segment. The original concept was that they would have a big leg up because they could put these satellites into the payloads of rockets that were going up for other customers, whether it's NASA or other governments. And then they could add their own satellites cheaply to these payloads. It hasn't worked out that way. Virtually every single rocket launch thus far has been a dedicated rocket launch solely for the purpose of launching Starlink satellites. So the cost structure is quite a bit higher than you might have imagined it was going to be.
And liftoff.
And in the end, how much room at the finish line is there for competitors in the LEO space race? Is there room for more than one, or is it a natural monopoly given the capital investment required and the limited market to be served?
We do believe that in the future, there will be probably 4, 5, maybe 6 players, not more. There is clearly room for those players because precisely the demand for connectivity, as you and I can experience every day, is just growing and growing.
The revenue opportunity is almost certainly going to keep being divided up because of all of these quasi-economic logic that's more geopolitical and military logic instead. And ultimately, it means you'll always have more competitors in this business than the economics would dictate makes any sense.
It's very exciting to see it growing like this, to see remote access without terrestrial infrastructure needed. That is a very interesting and exciting growth area.
We've come a long way since the days of Sputnik and Gemini and the space shuttle, days when we waited months for each launch, days when only governments could compete. Now there are launches nearly every day from private and government players, making the question not who will win, but what trophy the winner will take home.